and thanks for watching our demo today. My name is Jeff Will, and I'm a product manager here at Wallaroo. Just a little bit about me. I lead the product areas of model deployment and management, so I have a vested interest in making that experience as seamless as possible, which is part of what we're going to talk about today. Throughout my career, I've worked across product development, implementation, and solution architecture with a focus on using data products to make complex decision-making simple. So let's dive into how Wallaroo works with Databricks to do just that. Wallaroo is the perfect partner to Databricks because it picks up where Databricks leaves off. In the MLOps lifecycle, Databricks is great at loading and prepping data from your data sources and developing ML models, but benefits from Wallaroo's production deployment capabilities. So Wallaroo gives you scale by creating a repeatable production model operations process, makes it easy to learn by allowing you to deploy models using Wallaroo in existing ML tools. It ensures efficiency and business continuity by using familiar tools and reducing change management overhead for production ML, and adds actionability by measuring and taking timely, preventative, and corrective actions in the observability portion of Wallaroo. So with that, let's get started. And here I am in Azure Databricks, or in Azure, and I'm going to go into Databricks. I am using my sales demo instance. So I am going to launch my workspace here, which I've already got up and running. And as you'll see within my workspace, I have a notebook already uploaded, my Wallaroo anomaly detection. I also have my repo connected. So within our set of tutorials here, that's where my source data is, that's where my model is, and I've already got all of that set up within Databricks the same way you would within your organization. So as we go through this, I want to talk to you first about three key concepts within the Wallaroo platform. The first one is workspaces. It allows you to organize your work and collaborate. There's access control. You have owners and collaborators. Multiple people can be in there. The second concept is pipelines, which we use as inference workflows. When you need to do pre-processing or post-processing, those steps, in addition to one or more models, can all exist within that pipeline structure. And then lastly, our models, which I think everyone is familiar with, they're just our inference generation. So there's not a whole lot to that within the Wallaroo platform. Let's talk about deployment and management first. So we're going to use a well-known, the Boston housing model that predicts housing prices based on a set of inputs. And I'm going to walk you through how we connect to Wallaroo, deploy a model, import our libraries, the whole 9 yards. So typically, a user has to figure out how they would get all of this information deployed, right? So if you've got ML flow or a containerized model, you might have to hand this over to an ML engineer who has to wrap it in a wrapper to get it out into production, work with DevOps to get everything turned on and networked correctly. But with Wallaroo, we actually, on our compute cluster, can just install our library. So I've already got Wallaroo. It's available on PyPy, so you can just pull it straight down to your cluster and then import it into your notebook super easily, super streamlined. So let's pull that into our notebook. Let me jump back over here. And the first set here, we're going to pull in our libraries and everything we need. The next thing we're going to do, again, using the Wallaroo SDK, which we've now imported, we are going to connect to our instance. In this case, I'm using an instance that we affectionately call Squishy Wallaroo. That is the name for it. So it has a prefix, suffix. We'll set all this up, very straightforward stuff. And then it will give me a login command if I'm not already logged in, but in this case, I am. So we will then move on to a helper function here we have to create our workspace. So I'm naming it anomaly and my initials here. So that is running very quickly. And here we have our workspace name. The next step is we're going to upload our model. So in this command, I've named it anomaly housing model. I've given it my path from my repo, and I'm telling it that it is a TensorFlow model. So all of that I will upload, and we're good. So let's then build the pipeline. So again, our pipelines are our inferencing workflows. So I'm going to create a pipeline, calling it anomaly housing pipeline, but in this step, it will be mostly empty in this one line of code. Then I add a model using our add model step, and then I add a validation. This is where we do our anomaly detection. In this case, I'm setting it up to detect whenever our house price prediction is more than 100. In our model, that means it's more than $1 million home, and we don't think our model is sufficiently accurate at that point. So we want to know when our model's predicting something too high. And lastly, all in one command, I can deploy that all at the same time. So I'm creating and deploying my pipeline all at the same time. And there you have it. We now have a pipeline up and running. But to prove that to you, I'm going to run a normal prediction here, meaning within our, I know that this is going to yield one within our valid range. So if I run this command, I see there are no check failures, and my prediction is a 10, $100,000, give or take. And we can also see our anomaly detection work. So this one I know is not going to fit within our range. So we see our check failure is false, and we see that the value down here is 350 or $3.5 million. So well above what we are expecting. Lastly, I want to show you running multiple tests through the system. So I'm going to run a set of data that I have. I'm going to run 400 inferences and see what the distribution looks like. The idea here being that if you're a data scientist, you want to make sure your validation check is at the right place. You don't want too many alarms. You don't want to miss things that really are outside the range. So let's run through and see what a distribution looks like. And while I'm running that, I'm actually going to flip over to our Wallaroo UI and show you how all of these pieces look in our UI in addition to the SDK that we've just run through. So I'm going to open a new tab and sign into Squishy. And you can see that it authenticated me and put me right through. And that is because we've got the SSO integration over to Azure. So your Active Directory credentials are being used within Wallaroo as well. And you don't have to sign in again or manage another password or whatever the case may be. So we land on our default workspace, but if you recall, we want to go to our anomaly detection JCW or anomaly example JCW workspace here. So if I view this workspace, now you can see just on our landing screen that we've got a model and a pipeline here. Those would be the ones that we created. We have the ability, as you all may or may not know, to invite other people to this workspace. We can use Jupyter Hub as a different notebook environment if you ever needed to. You're probably going to stay in Databricks. So if I view my models, there's not a whole lot to this. It shows me the history of uploads and the different model versions I have. I can also go over to my pipelines, though, and I think this is where it becomes more interesting. We can create a pipeline here. If I click on this pipeline, I can also see the version history, and I can see the pipeline steps, that there's a model and my validation check. You can see the metrics of inferencing here and the different inferences, the different amount of inferences we've run through. Also, you get creating assays as you can in the SDK. This can also happen in the UI. So I'm just going to do a quick one here. So let's run this, and I'm just going to name it a test real quick. And I'm going to run a date range that I preloaded some data just to show you kind of what it looks like here. And it will generate us a preview of our distribution. So if we need to do drift detection on how that distribution changes, we can see that. I'm not going to run through all of this. We've got other demos and tutorials that'll walk you through this if this is of interest, but I just wanted to show you that all this comes over into this UI from the Databricks environment. So if I jump back over here, this set of 400 is done running. So I'm going to import a couple more libraries and then look at the distribution. So if you're the data scientist, you might look at this and say, well, this line is sufficient for the anomalies we have, but we could maybe be a little bit tighter if we aren't sure that we can predict housing prices closer to the $1 million range. So maybe you look at that and say, let's adjust our validation check, and you can then adjust the step back in the pipeline. So if you do see this too, and you know anomalies are happening, how do you look at them, right? Because you probably want to understand how often is this happening? What are their values? Do we need to do something to adjust the model? So I am going to pull from my pipeline logs where my valid equals false, aka my validation check failed, and we have an anomaly. And we will see a list of the anomalies in the logs. You can see I've been running this same anomaly over the last several days. And we can then look at these, look at the inputs and say, why are we getting these inputs? You can do your analysis to validate whether it's worth solving for this or not. And last but not least, just as good cleanliness practice, we undeploy pipelines that are not in use to free up the resources. If this is in production, obviously, you're going to want to leave it there. You're not undeploying all the time. But if you're doing testing with the model as you're getting it into production, validating the thing and the pipeline, validating that all the configs are correct, you don't need it running all the time. So I am going to undeploy this. And with that, that concludes our demo today and tutorial. If you have questions, we'd love to hear them. If there are things you would like to learn more in depth about, please let us know. Thanks for your time.